Scene of the Crime Season 1 explores the murders of 2 children and the subsequent investigation. Listener discretion is advised. When we left off at the end of Episode 2, around midday on Tuesday, February 14th, 2 bodies had been found in a secluded, wooded area off the southeast end of the Monon High Bridge. Word quickly spread among weary search party members that, tragically, their efforts were no longer needed. Mike Patty overheard subdued radio chatter among search party leaders that 2 bodies had been found that likely were the girls. Becky Patty and a female friend were together when the woman's husband called her. He was in the group of searchers who found the bodies, and his wife relayed the terrible news to Becky. Kelsi, part of a search party near the bridge, heard the searchers yelling back and forth. Her first impulse was to run to find her sister.
My first thought was, I need to run across the creek and get over to the other side. I need to see them. I need to hold my sister. And I need to give her the granola bar that's in my bag.
But her friend, Mrs. Bennett, who had herself lost her brother at age 17, held her back. She tried to soothe Kelsi, saying, "Wait, let the police do their job. We don't know if it's them." In hindsight, Kelsi has said she was very glad that she did not see her sister's body up close, as it lay on the cold ground. That would have been too much to bear. Kelsi interviewed Mrs. Bennett for us, and the 2 talked about the tragic discovery of the girls.
Somebody else had screamed, "We found them." And, wow. And I remember just how devastated you were and how you just kind of melted. And I remember holding you as I could and just trying to love on you as much as I could in that moment.
After the girls' bodies were found, did the police ask you questions as to whether or not you had seen anything or found anything?
No. After they were found, we were close enough to your grandpa that, you know, you went to him, and I just made sure that you were there and safe with somebody. And I remember you just saying that you needed your grandma. We needed to find your grandma.
Kelsi tells us that everyone in her family felt as though they had suffered a body blow.
Seconds later, I saw my biological grandfather. He was not standing too far away from me, and he had almost started collapsing to the ground when he had heard about it. And so my next thought was, he's going to have a heart attack again. So I ran to him and I helped him get back to the house instead of going towards my sister.
Kelsi concentrated on reuniting with her family members. They went back to the house where they waited for news. Anna Williams, waiting nervously at the fire station, was speaking with a friend on the phone when her pastor approached her and imparted the devastating news that her only child was dead.
Pastor Todd Ladd was approaching me, and I said, hey, because he was talking, I was like, I have to go. And he says, okay. And I hung up, and Todd said, has anybody talked to you in the last couple of minutes? And I said, no. He goes, we need to go upstairs. And before the words came out, I knew this was not good. And I just remember following him and walking up the stairs and us being alone and sat at the table, and he told me. And obviously, the initial shock. And then he said, obviously we are under the assumption at this point that it is the girls, but we still have to confirm that. So, so there's that 30 seconds of, well, maybe it's not. But in your heart of hearts, I knew. I'm like, well, who else could it be? And then my boyfriend at the time was brought upstairs. My parents were there shortly after. Mike and Becky's family started coming. And then we were all sat down and we all heard all of the things by that point. But then it was in a collective group about them discussing what and where and, just the basic stuff. And we all just stunned.
Kelsi had to call her and Libby's mom, Carrie Timmons, who lived in Kentucky, to tell her the horrible news that Libby was dead. As the families gathered themselves in grief, reconvening at the fire station to receive official word from authorities as to the discovery of the bodies, emergency officials descended on the Monon High Bridge trail area. By 1 p.m., the search and rescue operation had become an evidence recovery operation. Crime scene tape went up at the end of the Monon High Bridge, roping off the area down the left-hand side of the wooded hill at the bridge's southeast end, as well as a large surrounding space. Police also barricaded public access points to the cordoned-off area to prevent any contamination by civilians. Here is Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter addressing how quickly after the girls were found, the murder investigation began.
Almost instantaneously, as I understand it. I got up there about 2 hours or so after the girls were found, and at that time it was completely sealed.
Hundreds of police and other official vehicles parked along County Road 300 North and in the Morning Heights Cemetery that sits between that road and the wooded area to the north of Deer Creek. The coroner was brought in to document the state of the bodies before removing them to the morgue. Authorities began the painstaking process of poring over the area for evidence and clues. The FBI was involved in the case from the get-go. Here is Kelsi talking with Superintendent Carter for us.
I think that day, right after I heard that the girls were missing, or actually that they were gone, the FBI was there hours later.
Right.
I think that I was actually questioned by an FBI agent the first day, maybe.
Probably so.
A special FBI evidence recovery team, aided by bright nightlights powered by generator trucks, worked 24 hours a day for the next few days to collect any evidence at the scene and in the areas near the bridge. Indiana State Police crime scene techs also worked the scene, as did divers brought in to explore Deer Creek. It was immediately apparent to authorities on the scene that this was a very atypical situation. Then Carroll County Prosecutor Robert Ives, who held that office for 7 years until the end of 2017, visited the scene to observe it for himself in anticipation of a possible future criminal prosecution. Interviewed in connection with this podcast, Robert Ives told us,
there is a lot of crime scene evidence. Some of it is somewhat odd, but when I say that, any murder scene tends to have odd facts about it. I mean, in real life, obviously, people don't kill people really all that often. And this crime scene, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of unique facts there. And honestly, I'm shocked, and I promise you the police are shocked that it wasn't solved in a day or two. The crime scene was physically strange, but that's for the state police to decide what to release and not release. I've said that before. It's very odd.
Of course, he would not elaborate on what these irregularities were. But the fact that the FBI was brought in so quickly is a testament to the unusual circumstances in this unique setting. Even though the area was closed off to the public, based on where crime scene investigators were concentrating, rumors began to circulate that the bodies had actually been found across Deer Creek from the Monon High Bridge on private property. Kelsi described the area across Deer Creek to us.
The place that the girls were in was kind of like a deep valley, so it was kind of hard to get to them.
At the fire station, the families were officially told the devastating news. Here is Kelsi.
Once we got there, the police had to formally tell us that the girls were definitely murdered. They had to make sure that we knew what was going on. We had to know kind of the process that was about to happen. So they kind of informed us on that stuff. And then I got interrogated after that. Just so that they could talk to me, so that they could know what I knew or what I didn't know, because they had to find the person that did this.
Immediately after meeting with the families, Indiana State Police Public Information Officer Kim Riley, Carroll County Sheriff Tobe Lesenby, and Delphi Police Chief Steve Mullins held a joint press conference at 1:50 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14th. While they confirmed that 2 bodies were found, they released limited information. They did not identify the bodies as being Libby and Abby at this time, although they did announce that search efforts for the missing girls were being scaled back. They said that the bodies were located about half a mile upstream, east, from the Monon High Bridge area. It was not specified exactly where the bodies were found, just that they were about 50 feet from the edge of Deer Creek. Sergeant Riley said in the press conference,
"We have found 2 bodies. Is that the Sugar Creek?
Deer Creek.
Deer Creek, sorry. In Deer Creek, about a mile east of town. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play."
When asked why authorities believed foul play was involved, Sergeant Riley would only say,
"Just the way the bodies were found. That's about all I can say at this point in time."
Officials would not elaborate on these ominous statements. It was devastating enough that 2 bodies had been found and were very likely the missing girls. Everyone in the Delphi community, especially those who knew the family or had participated in the search for the girls, was shocked and horrified by this news that murder was suspected. As Sheriff Tobe Lesenby put it, "It's been a long several hours. It's played tremendously on the emotions of this community." Sergeant Riley confirmed that the FBI Indianapolis office was now involved in the case, along with all the other state and local law enforcement entities that were relevant. That night, several Carroll County churches took part in a prayer service and candlelight vigil for Libby and Abby. Even though there had been no official confirmation that they were dead, word had spread, possibly from searchers who knew the girls and were present when they were found. More than 700 community members attended the vigil, crying tears of grief and disbelief. This kind of thing didn't happen in Delphi. It was a family town, a safe place. Everyone knew each other, and no one locked their doors. Mike said that the best word to describe his family's reaction was shock, which persisted for months. Becky said she went on autopilot for weeks. Here is Anna describing it to us.
When the funeral director asked me what kind of casket I wanted, and I was like, "Are you, what? You want to know if I want a what?" It was just like this, it just didn't conform in my mind what kind of a question that even was. I can't even describe it. There were times after that, especially the first few months, I'd swear I'd heard her in her room. You know, you wake up and I felt like I'd seen her walk by. Just those things. And I said for the longest while too, you know, she used to spend time with my dad. She'd go away for a week. She'd, you know, be gone for this, that, and the other. I said it just felt like she has been at the longest camp in the entire world.
And Kelsi was similarly distraught and disjointed.
It didn't really sink in until after the viewing and the funeral. I didn't want to believe it, so I would wait in my room, and because I hadn't seen either of them, I didn't know for sure that they were gone, so I kept telling myself it wasn't them, even after my grandpa identified the body and told us that it was definitely Libby. I still didn't want to believe it. So I would sit in my room and just pray that Libby was coming home. And even after that, I would still drive up the driveway and check to see if her light was on in her room, because I was still in denial for a really long time.
Their lives were permanently upturned by the devastating events of that day. Here is Mike talking to us.
I had to pick her up from practice. I mean, that was kind of our routine. Every day I'd pick them up from somewhere, you know what I mean? Whatever practice it was, or that's all changed, you know? People don't understand that our lives have turned 360 degrees and another 180, you know what I mean? It's hard to explain.
But it wasn't just the abrupt loss of their girls that shook everyone so. It was the disquieting knowledge that someone else was responsible. Desperate for answers and to feel like they were doing something, over the next few days, Mike and others conducted organized grid searches and walked the miles around the area where the girls were found, looking for any clues that could tell them what had happened. Around noon on Wednesday, February 15th, Indiana State Police Sergeant Kim Riley and Sheriff Tobe Lesenby held another press conference confirming what everyone already knew. The bodies found in the woods were Libby and Abby.
I think yesterday I made a remark that they were near the water. It was about 50 feet off the shoreline. So I was off on that. I hadn't been to the scene yet. I was going with information I'd received. So they were I was looking from a distance, but I'm going to say it was between 50 and 60 feet off the shoreline. This is considered a double homicide investigation. The toxicology reports are yet to come. I mean, that takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. I believe the initial on the two girls is done or just about completed.
Neither official would comment on the condition of the bodies or the cause of death, citing respect for the family and the ongoing investigation. To this day, Abby's and Libby's cause of death has never been released. Here is Superintendent Doug Carter explaining this decision to us.
Only the murderer would know.
Police have kept this information to themselves. We spoke with Dr. Katherine M. Brown, an expert in child abductions and murders, in connection with this podcast. She is an assistant professor of criminal justice at Tarleton State University who conducts research on child abduction murders and serves as a consultant to child abduction response teams around the nation. Dr. Brown has consulted on approximately 200 child abduction and murder investigations. She told us that withholding some information from the public is the right course of action.
But I will tell you that those investigators are doing what they really need to do in those cases, which is try to keep certain details of those cases out of the public, in particular details that only the offender would know.
Police also refused to comment as to whether they had any suspects. They requested that anyone who had been at the Monon High Bridge trail area on Monday contact police. Sheriff Lesenby remarked that he did not believe there was any threat to the public, but he then somewhat contradicted that by saying that he did believe that the public should remain alert and vigilant. Sergeant Riley again.
We have nobody in custody at this time. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, there is somebody out there that did this horrendous crime, and we're going to track him down.
He also said, somewhat cryptically in a brief solo public appearance that day,
I'm not going to say one way or the other. Again, people just have to realize that this has occurred and to be mindful and watch what's going on around you. I think people need to be cautious and careful and be parents and just make sure they know where their children are at, what their children are doing, and if nothing else, know what's going on in their lives. And that's the most important thing I can say at this point in time.
Sergeant Riley also conveyed a heartfelt thank you from the families.
One thing the family asked us to do is to thank all the communities around Delphi and the people here in Delphi for assisting in attempting to locate these the two young children that were missing earlier. They just wanted to say thank you to those people, and thank you. They were just wanted to express their gratitude toward the hard work that was done in helping search for these children.
Although at the press conference, police had refused to address whether there were any suspects, it seems they did have some information about someone of interest to them very early on. At 6:50 p.m. on Wednesday the 15th, the Indiana State Police released some nearly identical, grainy photos of a man that they said they believed was on the High Bridge Trail around the same time that Abby and Libby were. They were looking to speak to this person and asked the public to please contact them if the man was recognized by anyone. They also asked to speak to anyone who was parked at the High Bridge Trail trailhead between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. on the 13th. At this time, police did not call the man in the photos a suspect, and they made no disclosure as to the origin of the photos. But the man in the photos is clearly walking on the bridge. Authorities would not reveal who took the photos of the man on the bridge for several more days. And when they did, it catapulted Abby and Libby's case into a new level of notoriety due to the inconceivable singularity of the circumstances. A brutal murderer captured on film by his soon-to-be victim. At the press conference on the 15th, police also confirmed that they had received various tips. One of these led to the search warrant the Indiana State Police executed on the night of February 16th at a family farm on Bicycle Bridge Road, about 5 miles from the Monon High Bridge. Despite investigators from the FBI, the Indiana State Police, and the Carroll County Sheriff's Office taking photos and collecting items from the home over a 2-hour period, no announcements or arrests resulted from this search. Police also twice searched the land, home, and vehicle belonging to the man who owned the property where Libby and Abby were found, a local named Ron Logan. We will discuss much more about Ron Logan in a later episode. On the 16th, police announced that a tip line had been set up to allow members of the public to call in tips on the case. The Department of Homeland Security provided satellite dishes and other equipment to support the thousands of calls that would come into the line over the coming days and weeks. Let's take some time here to consider how the news of this unthinkable murder impacted the community. As we have noted, Delphi is a very small town where everyone knows everyone and people wave and say hello. Of course, everyone was in shock and disbelief. Robert Ives told us,
I do recall when the girls were reported missing, because it's not unusual for teenagers to be missing for a period of, an hours or a day, because they've run off, they've run off to Canada. I actually had 2 young people run off to Canada one time. And generally you think, oh, well, they'll turn up tomorrow, they'll turn up the day after. And the next day it was shocking when the girls were found dead.
But it went deeper than that. When Abby and Libby were killed, in short, the Delphi residents' entire world was rocked to its core. Everything they took for granted, the safety of their kids, the benevolence of the residents and visitors, the unlocked doors, the pristine beauty and peacefulness of the trail system, was all shattered. Anna told us about the safe feel of the town.
We live in a quiet little spot out in the country, and yet just a mile or so from town, which is super convenient when you're doing lots of different activities and quick trips to the store or grab something to eat, but never really worried about that. We all lived in a generation where we didn't always lock our doors. It never seemed to be a concern. So it just, the whole thing is mind-boggling, and it changed everybody's perspective here because of that.
Mike agrees.
People leave their doors unlocked, leave the keys in the car, garage doors open at night. I mean, that's just the way it was. And unfortunately, this changed all that. Don't know if anybody does that stuff anymore.
Mrs. Bennett, who had been with Kelsi when the girls were found, told us that her own child was traumatized by the events of that day.
So my oldest daughter was, in high school, but I remember she wouldn't come home alone. Every time she would come home and it was dark, she would call me and say, "Mom, can you meet me at the front door? I don't want to walk in the dark alone." My youngest daughter actually had a lot of what I would call a mental breakdown.
In an attempt to heal, people turned to each other in their grief, and the community truly pulled together to support the families. Here is Kelsi.
We had tables and tables of bread and food and all kinds of stuff. We had so much food from the community that we had to start donating the food before it went bad.
Doug Carter talked with Kelsi about how much the food was appreciated by law enforcement working the case.
Oh my gosh. That's a whole nother issue.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable meals. I'll always remember this community for the outpouring of support for your family. But then that transition to us and how they welcomed us. Mm-hmm. Some of the best pies and casseroles ever. So yeah, we ate really well.
But more than just food was contributed. Local restaurants like Pizza King held fundraisers for the Patties and Anna. The Delphi McDonald's donated $1 from every Big Mac. An apparel company in town sold T-shirts and donated the proceeds. On Saturday, February 18th, a motorcycle rally was held through the streets of Delphi to raise money for the families of the two girls. 4,000 bikers showed up, paying $20 per bike and $5 per passenger to participate, with the proceeds going to the families. In addition, 2 GoFundMe accounts started to rack up donations. Support came in other non-monetary ways as well. Entire classrooms of kids wrote the families letters and delivered jars filled with positive sticky notes commemorating Libby's favorite means of communicating. Delphi businesses referenced the girls on their sidewalk chalkboards. Light poles throughout the town were festooned with ribbons of purple and teal, Libby and Abby's favorite colors. The outpouring of support and love that's been given to us is positively overwhelming, said Sheriff Tobe Lesenby. In a tangible expression of that sentiment, people in Delphi and throughout central Indiana followed in the footsteps of Libby's mom, Carrie Timmons, and put orange light bulbs in their front porch lights to honor the girls and to burn until their killer is apprehended. Westinghouse Corporation agreed to send a semi containing 2,500 bulbs to Delphi, and Lowe's donated 1,000 bulbs as well to be distributed free. Now orange lights illuminate Delphi and parts of central Indiana to be extinguished only when the killer is brought to justice. We will return to our story after a brief message from our sponsors. But even while the community pulled together to support the families, they were also newly concerned with protecting themselves. Local gyms started offering free self-defense classes. Applications for gun permits increased. People began locking their doors and made their children stay within eyesight. Anna says,
"We're talking about a town that the worst thing that generally happens is old Mr. So-and-so has a few extra drinks one evening, and you worry about him getting home, and you have to argue with him about the keys, and that's about it. I think we all got shocked into the regular world's reality that apparently you shouldn't just let your kids go on a walk, even when they do all the things they're supposed to. Stay together, have a phone, make sure you have water, those general things. And I still feel like there's a lot of that here in the community. I still see kids out walking. Families are still going and doing things, but we're locking our doors. Things change.
People started to question everything. Anna told us a story about an incident that had occurred a year or so beforehand that was not a big deal at the time, but that she recalled in hindsight now that a killer seemed to be in their midst.
I had one incident at a store where I remember making eye contact with somebody when we walked in, and they were sitting in their vehicle when we left, and it happened to be his side was closest to Abby, but she got in the car, and he and I spoke for a few seconds, and it was awkward because he said, "You look like you know who I am." And I was like, "Well, sir, I've worked in restaurants, nursing homes here. I know a lot of people by sight, but not by name. I apologize." And that was all the conversation was. But I do recall Abby saying, "That man kind of made me feel creepy." I said, "Well, anytime you ever come across that, you be sure and pay attention. If you were driving or you were leaving a store and somebody made you feel that way, you go back into the store and you ask somebody to walk you out to your car. You pay attention to that feeling." And that was probably a year or so before we lost them.
Kelsi says she became suspicious of everyone.
Absolutely. I started looking at my managers at work differently. I started looking at my teachers differently, my bus drivers, whoever I came encounter with. I was looking at them in a different perspective now. Even now, I still do that. But then I was looking at my Facebook friends, my Snapchat friends, my Instagram followers. I was just looking at every single person, trying to figure out who could have done something like this.
Of course, the murder of the girls was linked in everyone's minds with the Monon High Bridge trail. Becky reminds us that the trails were the pride of Delphi and truly part of the community until that day.
In the beginning, you had people acting like we took them out in the middle of nowhere and dropped them off on a trail, but the trails are what kids did. That, we don't have movies or skating rinks or bowling alleys or anything for kids to do. What we do around Delphi is they would do the trails. We used to ride our bikes around the trails. The trails was a big part of Delphi. They advertised the trails. If you look at the decorations in town, the flags on the poles say Delphi Trails, celebrate Delphi, celebrate the trails. That was just a big thing for Delphi and the community to do. They actually, and if you look, from downtown to there is probably not 1.5 miles or so. You go out, and then you've got the Freedom Bridge. They have it all lit up and great big signs and everything out there advertising for the trails. They wanted you to come here. It was to bring people in. It wasn't like they were out in the middle of nowhere. And then if you look from the Freedom Bridge, you've got 3 houses and a business from there to the trailhead where they were. It was not remote like people would say.
You might recall that on the day that Libby and Abby went missing, Derek was at the trails searching for them, and he ran into a man in a flannel shirt who told him he had not seen the girls on the Monon High Bridge trail. That man was Dan McCain, president of the Delphi Historic Trails. He was instrumental in developing the trail system in Delphi. He said that the news about the murders on the trails was devastating to the families and to the entire town. For McCain, the legacy of the trail system was irreparably damaged. He told the Journal and Courier, "It's going to strike a fear in this community. We have a trail system that's glorious. It's a big part of who we are in Delphi. I know people will be afraid now. I just know that, and for that, I'm devastated too," he said. Of course, the murders prompted a heightened safety concern on the trails. To deter people from using the bridge after the murders, Indiana Landmarks placed a temporary fence at its north end, closing it off, and erected a sign warning against trespassing. And in early March, Delphi's Historic Trails Association launched a trail safety task force to discuss safety improvements to the trail system, including installing video cameras. Sadly, parents in Delphi and the surrounding areas said that they would no longer allow their children to experience the trails absent adult accompaniment. In one particularly poignant show of community solidarity, In early May, a group of about 100 people gathered to walk the Monon High Bridge trail the girls hiked the day they were killed in a sort of Take Back the Trails rally. But people were permanently spooked, and understandably so. A predator who attacked children during the daytime, in public, was potentially living in their community. Tensions were running high. People began venting on Facebook and in other forums that police weren't issuing enough information, and speculating as to who could be responsible for this horrific crime. People also began to see the man on the bridge everywhere. One woman posted a photo she took of her kids running on a trail in West Lafayette, showing a man sitting on a bench in the background who had similar characteristics to the image released by law enforcement, including jeans, jacket, and a hat or cap of some kind, just like those owned by most men in Indiana. She posted the photo released by the police side by side with hers, juxtaposing the two men. People even started creating sketches based on the pixelated photo of the man on the bridge, comparing them side by side with photos of actual people, and circulating these mock-ups with the implicit suggestion that the person was responsible for the crime. Carroll County Prosecuting Attorney Robert Ives was forced to issue a statement reminding residents to not harass, bother, or accuse anyone. Just let the police do their work. This was just the first of many rebukes that law enforcement would have to issue to the public, which was beginning to engage in accusations based on rumors and gossip. Outside Delphi, the case had a huge national impact as well. It made headlines and morning talk shows around the country. Crime aficionados like Nancy Grace and Dr. Phil, and major networks like CNN and HLN covered it extensively. From the family's perspective, this widespread coverage was good publicity. Perhaps it could possibly generate the tip they desperately needed. But it certainly had a downside for these people so unused to the spotlight. Here is Kelsi.
It's a very crazy feeling. Like, you don't ever think that you'll see your sister's face on national TV like that. Maybe I did, but for different reasons. I always thought she was going to cure cancer or something really big, but I never would have thought that her name would be this big for the reason that it is. But in the beginning, it was very annoying because these news people would start coming to our house and knocking on our door, and some of them would look into our windows and record into our windows. And that was during the time that we all really just needed a breather. We just needed a minute to collect ourselves. We needed a minute to just try to figure out what was going on because we didn't understand what was happening. This isn't something that happens in Delphi.
Services for the girls, of course, were especially emotional. On Saturday, February 18th, a public memorial service and visitation for Abby and Libby was held at one of the Delphi community schools. The visitation was originally scheduled from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., but that was extended to 10:30 p.m. because of the huge number of people who turned out to participate. A lighted lantern release capped off the event that night. The girls' funerals were both held on Sunday, February 19th, and were private, but their funeral processions were accompanied by masses of people lining the streets to pay their respects. Anna tells us that Abby's funeral was a complete blur. She was too distraught to interact with those who attended, including the boy who had been Abby's little Facebook friend, who attended Abby's service with his father. Kelsi says bluntly,
"It was such a weird feeling to see your little sister in her casket. I don't know. I really don't know how I felt at the time. I think I was just going through the motions, kind of. I just kind of went along with everything because I wanted it to be over. I just wanted to wake up from the really bad dream I was having."
On February 19th, authorities announced that they believed that the man captured in the photos released days before was the prime suspect in the murder of Abby and Libby. This was a truly incredible development. someone had captured photos of the probable killer, yet it was not known who he was. In fact, it still wasn't even known who the photographer was. Let's discuss the image released by the Delphi authorities as captured in the photos released. As stated on the FBI's website, the photo appears to depict a white male wearing blue jeans, a blue coat or jacket, and a hoodie. The photos are grainy and pixelated. They appear to have been taken from a distance and then zoomed in, resulting in the loss of detail. The photos show a man walking on the Monon High Bridge. The tree distantly visible behind him in the photos places him on the bridge, walking from the metal barricaded northwestern end toward the southeastern dead end, somewhere around 60 feet away from the southeastern end of the bridge. He is looking down, perhaps watching his footing on the rickety trestles. His hands are not visible. They appear to be in his pockets, not a position someone unsure of their footing would likely take, but while the left hand seems to be in the left hip pocket of his jeans, his right hand is higher up, possibly inside the right-hand pocket of his jacket. His jeans are baggy and faded. The navy zip-up jacket over his hoodie appears to be of a lightweight canvas material. There also appears to be a brown expanse around his waist. It could be just the bottom of his hoodie, which seems brown in color, protruding from under his jacket. But some believe that he is wearing a fanny pack, tool belt, or deer kit. There is also strenuous debate as to whether this man is wearing a hat, has his hood up, both or neither. Nondescript, bulky black shoes or boots complete the man's wardrobe. How law enforcement arrived at the determination that this was their man was not addressed. But it would not be long before there would be a clue. On February 22, 2017, there was a major joint press conference held by the Indiana State Police, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, the Delphi PD, and the FBI. Together, the officials emphasized that the resources being mobilized in the double murder investigation were unprecedented. Indiana State Police Sergeant Tony Slocum reiterated that the man in the photo on the bridge is the suspect in the killings of Abby and Libby. Then, a visibly emotional Doug Carter of the Indiana State Police took the lectern and started off with the statement,
"Why Libby? Why Abby? Why Delphi? Why Carroll County? Why the region? Why the state? Why even the nation?" I say that because this is a classic example and a clear example that evil lives amongst us. The poster in front of you. Someone knows who this individual is. Someone knows who this individual is. Is it a family member? Is it a neighbor? Is it an acquaintance? Is it an associate? Or maybe that one guy that lives over at that one place that just kind of not right. Maybe it's his jeans. Maybe it's his jacket or his sweatshirt. Maybe it's his shirt tail. Maybe it's his posture. Maybe it's the right hand in his pocket. You see, even with technology, we need human intelligence. In other words, we need you. I'm not suggesting that science, that everything that we can do as science has been done, because we are just getting started. Please do not rationalize tips away. Rationalize what you think that might not be important away. By thinking he would never do that to another human being. Or think what I know doesn't matter. Let folks like the people that are standing behind me with such incredible passion and commitment and dedication to this profession make that determination. Tips are anonymous. Some might not want to talk about it because they don't want to get involved, because they know the individual. Again, he may be a family member, probably has family. No one will ever know. No one will ever know. There's not an agency on the planet better than helping us facilitate this than the FBI. And they're as entrenched in this as anybody. No one will know. As poor as this picture is, somebody knows. And if you're watching, we'll find you.
Then Greg Massa, Assistant Special Agent in charge for the FBI, addressed the media, emphasizing the FBI's commitment to the case. He stated that an FBI agent from Indianapolis had been present during the initial searches for the girls, and that since they were found, the FBI had been standing shoulder to shoulder with local law enforcement in this investigation. While the chief investigators on the case would remain the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, assisted by the Indiana State Police, Agent Massa said that on any given day, 20 FBI agents were in Delphi, assisting on the case around the clock. He stated that even FBI Director James Comey had been briefed twice on the developments in the case. Agent Massa then presented a very general profile of the behavior likely exhibited by the suspect after the killings of Libby and Abby, to provide the public with guidelines regarding what to look for among their own family, friends, and acquaintances. We will address this profile further when we discuss suspects in a later episode. He concluded by saying that he believed that this case would be solved. When Agent Massa concluded his remarks, Captain Dave Burston, Chief Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police, dropped a bombshell, one that has made this case the international sensation that it is. Libby's cell phone, the one that Libby had used to post her photos on the Monon High Bridge to Snapchat, the one her family had called and texted over and over when looking for her, the one that had pinged and then gone silent, had provided authorities with usable data. And it wasn't just location services or text messages. Authorities had retrieved audio from a video found on the cell phone that Libby had on her that day. And that audio file captured the voice of the man who killed her and Abby. This was bone-chilling. Listeners were riveted by this revelation at the press conference, horrified yet fascinated as they personally heard the presumed killer's voice issuing the order down the hill to his targets. People who heard the somewhat muffled voice said it sent chills down their spine and described hearing it as creepy, upsetting, haunting. What's more, Captain Burston confirmed that the image previously released of the man on the bridge, the suspect, was not a photo at all, but was a video still that had been extracted from video footage on Libby's phone, the same video that recorded the audio of the suspect. Captain Burston said,
"We do have some new information for you today. It's in the form of an audio file from the cell phone that Liberty German had with her at the time. We're not going to play everything that we have, but Liberty had the presence of mind to turn on her video camera."
Police admitted to having more video other than just the still shots disseminated to the public, but were not releasing it at that time. They emphasized,
"But we are going to share this audio clip with you momentarily with the hope that somebody will recognize this voice. And I want to be very clear that what you're about to hear is just 4 short words. 3 words. Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill."
Indiana State Police Sergeant Tony Slocum later clarified that they decided to release the audio clip because, he said, "We believe that his voice is distinctive enough that someone will recognize it." This audio clip has been analyzed endlessly by all the Delphi followers out there, and everyone hears something different in the voice. For Sergeant Slocum, what he hears is exasperation. It sounds like he's a little exasperated, like he told them before to do it, he said. After Captain Burston finished his remarks, Sergeant Slocum announced that a reward fund had been established for information leading to the arrest of the killer or killers of Libby and Abby. At the time of the press conference, it already amounted to $41,000. The money had been donated by local businesses, as well as the FBI. After the official statements in the press conference concluded, officials responded to some questions from reporters and revealed some additional pieces of information. Captain Burston stated that as far as the suspect goes, nothing was considered off the table with regard to whether he was local or not, or whether this was a crime of opportunity perpetrated by a stranger, or in the alternative, someone who knew that the girls were going to be there that day. "It's all being looked at," Captain Burston said. He could not confirm that the voice in the audio clip belonged to the man in the photos, and he said law enforcement had not ruled out the possibility that more than one killer was involved. Kelsi has said that not only were she and her sister big fans of forensic investigative shows like CSI, the girls had been taught by Mike to be vigilant, be aware of their surroundings, and maintain skepticism toward those they didn't know. With the revelation that Libby had captured her attacker on video, it became clear that even in the face of what was almost certainly overwhelming fear, Libby maintained her composure and was able to remember what she had learned. Indiana State Police Sergeant Tony Slocum concluded the press conference with remarks about Libby.
This young lady's a hero, there's no doubt. To have enough presence of mind to activate the video system on her cell phone to record what we believe is criminal behavior that is about to occur.
Sergeant Slocum's remarks about Libby's heroism emphasize exactly why Abby and Libby's story has captured so much attention worldwide. Terrible things happen to children across the United States on a daily basis. Yet this case has truly touched hearts all across the globe. Perhaps this is because of the girls' sweet natures, or the innocence of their outing that afternoon, juxtaposed with its horrific ending. But more likely, it's because of the terrible irony that 14-year-old Libby was brave enough to leave behind video and audio recordings of her killer, yet his identity continues to elude us. Anna told us that she was too devastated and angry to attend the press conference.
When my boyfriend got home from work that evening, he said, "So have you heard this yet?" And I said, "No, I really didn't want to earlier, and now I just really didn't want to do it alone." So sat and listened to it, and, that was the first thing. I said, I don't know which is better right now, I said, because my biggest fear was that I was going to recognize that voice, and it was going to be somebody we knew, and it wasn't. And then it was also the fact that I didn't know who that was at all, and that was uncomfortable also. So it was kind of both at the same time. We wanted to know, but we didn't. We didn't want to be somebody that we knew. We didn't want to be somebody that we saw 3 times a week. It was strange for sure.
Mike made a public statement on March 9th, speaking for the first time at a news conference at the Carroll County Courthouse. He said,
"This horrible crime has torn a hole in our families that'll never heal. It's the small things that seem to hurt the most. I don't know exactly what happened out there that day, but I imagine there was probably an opportunity for one or both to separate and try to make a break different ways. But those girls loved each other. They were good friends. Neither one of them left each other's side. Both those girls are heroes."
Mike then made a renewed plea for the public to take another look at the picture of the man on the bridge and to listen to the audio clip of his voice.
Somebody has to know this person, recognize that voice, and I encourage them to call in and give us that vital piece of information. No matter how small it may seem, it may fit into another piece of the puzzle that'll help put closure to this.
But over the coming months and years, tens of thousands of tips would still fail to lead to the killer. We will continue with Scene of the Crime, Delphi, in our next episode. If you have any information about Libby and Abby, please call the tip line at 1-844-459-5786. Scene of the Crime is narrated by me, Natalie Gray. Research and writing by Jessica Bettencourt. Technical advisor Gray Hughes. Consulting producer Kelsi German. Producers Gray Hughes, Jessica Bettencourt, and Mike Morford. Executive producer Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Special thanks to the families of Liberty German and Abigail Williams, Kelsi German, Mike Patty, Becky Patty, and Anna Williams. Thanks also goes out to Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, Robert Ives, Paul Holes, Dr. Katherine M. Brown, Colleen Fitzpatrick, Drew Collins, Michael Bennett, and Bree Wilber. If you'd like to help this podcast reach new listeners, be sure to subscribe to it and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please recommend Scene of the Crime to your friends. You can find Scene of the Crime on Twitter with the handle @SceneOfCrimePod.